Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this big guy right here. This is the CRKT XOC, spelled XOC, for some reason. Anyways, before we go any further though, in the name of full disclosure, this guy was sent to me by the manufacturer for review. They didn't even tell me what they were sending me. They said, Nick, we've got something brand new, we want you to take a look, and they sent it along. And oh my god, when I lifted up that box, was I amused just by the way. Anyways, but nevertheless, we do have to assume this is the very best quality controlled one of these ever, and I've done my best not to let that affect my review. I told him, as always, I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, the ugly. It might be a gem, might be junk, and they still sent it along, but still, do keep that in mind as you're watching this review, and I've tried not to let that affect things too much. But anyways, next thing, size comparison. Here it is against the Spyderco PM2. So you can see here that this thing is gigantic. This knife is absolutely 100% totally freaking gigantic. It is huge-tacular. You can see here, blade length-wise, it dwarfs the PM2. Thickness-wise, it dwarfs the PM2. I mean, this guy is gigantic. Here it is against your Spyderco Delica, which looks just absolutely beautifully like, oh, little guy. Next to this knife is, the hugitude of this knife in hand is hard to really capture. You look at a picture, you're like, oh, that could be reasonable. Not entirely, no. And then actually, I'll compare it against two other CRKT knives that I happen to have on the table. Here it is against Cricut Homefront here, and here we have it against the Cricut CEO. CEO. And so, as you can see here, this guy is large. Large. Oh my god, large. So, there you go. And actually, let me do a real quick measurement right quick. So you can just see this guy's coming in around 4.25 inches of usable blade length. And that's a lot. Next thing, speaking of elephant-sized objects, the elephant in the room with this guy, that is the price. This is a $750 knife. This is CRKT's first foray into the super high-end. They've done some higher-end pieces before, you know, in the 200, 300 range. But this is really set. This is an attempt to do a Halo product, I think. But that price will come as a shock with a capital X to a bunch of people. Because I think a lot of folks may struggle with the idea that a brand that is known historically for doing budgety sorts of things, you know, this kind of thing, is actually going to be dropping a $750 knife. But the thing is, hold on. Before you start leaving the, oh my god, I'm never going to pay more than 10 bucks for a CRKT comment, look, think about it. I think it's an objective good to have major makers having the ability to work throughout a price range, right? Think how many great designs have been undermade, or how many people would love overmade versions of a budget knife they've loved for years. So let's work on this. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt here. Humor me. Think about this as either a new day for the company, for them starting over, or if it makes your cognitive schema easier to build, think about this as a brand new company, the completely ridiculous knife and tool company, and let's think about it in that domain. You know, the question here is not whether this knife fits our mental model of CRKT, or whether they should dabble on the high end. Those are other questions, but not necessarily the ones I'm asking here. The question is whether they've managed to justify the price and whether the quality is there in this piece. So anyways, let's go on ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of the CRKT XOC here. So, first off, a couple of reasonable things to point out. This actually has a good clip. It's a milled titanium clip. It's very specialized, and in some ways it matches the overall contour of the knife. It seems to fit in very well with a nice gold ano. But the thing is, it works well. At a fundamental level, this knife actually carries way better than you would expect. I mean, I'm not going to say it carries well, because this knife is, speaking of elephants in the room here, this knife comes in here at about 11 ounces. That's not going to ever carry like anything that isn't a brick, and it's also going to be really, really, really freaking thick. But at the same time, I gotta say, it carries a lot better than you'd expect. You can throw this guy in your pocket and almost 3/4 an inch. Anyways, it carries better than you would expect. And so, all things considered, that was actually a shock to me, how well it was able to carry. Next thing, this knife actually had a recall. So, to the best of my knowledge, not a lot of these have gone out. I know that a bunch of reviewers ended up getting them, and every one of those reviewers got an email with some clear embarrassment from the CRKT product team, explaining basically that they had an issue with their supplier, whereby the thumb studs were put together incorrectly with too much torque, and for a couple of people, those thumb studs had cracked. And so they actually, you know, sent, you know, everything to get them back and everything. They fixed the thumb stud, sent it back out. But you think to yourself, well, Nick, you're putting a recall in the good. But the thing is, okay, think about it this way. This, they had some thumb studs that broke on 1 or 2 models. But they went ahead and they recalled all of them, including all the ones that they sent to gear reviewers. They could have just let that go. They could have said, well, what are the chances that anyone's going to have that happen? But it was more important to them that they be safe, that they send these knives, that they get the knives back and they replace a part that could be faulty than it was. I mean, think of the PR crisis of sending every gear reviewer a, hey, our $750 knife has a bad part. Honestly, that's kind of a ballsy move, but it's an integrity move. And so, although I'd have preferred had that issue not been the case at all, the fact that they handled it the way they did actually really did impress me. And so I think I'm going to put that under good, because it shows a level of integrity that they absolutely could have skipped otherwise. So the handling of that was very good. Next thing, I like this deadbolt lock. I've looked at this before on the CRKT Seismic, but the basic idea here is that you've got this little piece down here, and when you open the knife, that lifts up a little bit, and then when the knife locks, you can see it drops down into place, and if you watch this assembly, the whole thing makes a little more sense. But at the moment, there were little protrusions sitting on this that have locked into the blade. And then, in order to unlock the knife, you press down this center pivot button here, and that pushes this out of the way. And once you've pushed it out of the way, the knife can fall shut with no effort whatsoever. It's a beautiful thing. And so I like this lock a lot because it's got some advantages. The fingers are outside of the blade path. There is no way, you know, unlike a liner lock or a frame lock where I've got my thumb here, at this point, there is no way to really hurt myself effectively when closing this knife. That's a good thing. It feels very secure. It locks up well. There's no concern with it particularly, so I'm digging that 100%. This is a very nice little lock. And it's nice to see it here, even, you know, this is a big old knife, and this is a big old lock, and I hope to see it in smaller ones too, but it's good to see it here. Next thing, this has very good ergonomics. This is a weird thing to say, and I suspect if I had hands that were reasonably sized, I would feel even more this way. But the thing is, you have a bunch of different carry options. You've got something like this, and the clip is done widely enough that there aren't really problems. You have yourself the ability to kind of choke up and move ahead here. That actually feels surprisingly good in my hand. On this guy, you have very good balance, particularly it's balanced right about here, and so in this domain, this actually feels very wieldy. You can say it's unwieldy. Can you say it's wieldy? Well, I just did. It feels very wieldy. And you know, certainly, it seems to work out. They've even got these little grip grooves right here, which I think are very helpful as you are doing things like unlocking and locking the knife. They just give you a little bit of extra traction here on this, what could otherwise be a very smooth titanium plate. So ergonomically, this is good to go. Next thing, the action is good. As a flipper tab, you can deploy it without any particular difficulty. It is a light switch flipper through and through. Trying to press it, push button, it doesn't work. But if you light switch it properly, I've never failed to deploy. And it has a false shut action. Now, mind you, it helps that the blade is like half a freaking pound. That's gonna fall shut. But at the same time, still, that's pretty impressive. The action on this guy is absolutely good to go. And one other little good to go sort of element of it is right in this little hole right here. If we zoom in a little bit, you can see, hopefully, that there is a little tiny T6 screw in there. And if you loosen that screw or tighten that screw, it actually affects the pressure of the detent bar, and that'll make, again, more sense. There's a separate bar that the detent is on, little armature, and it affects the pressure with which that is pressing into the hole, and that changes your detent. So if your detent is too soft, you can dial that up a little bit, or if it's too hard, you can dial it back down. It's never going to be a hard, crisp, breaky kind of detent that you're going to see in other kinds, but it is definitely harder. It definitely does make it harder or easier to open the blade. And so I like that very much. It's a little thing. They didn't have to do it, but they certainly did, and it's kind of a cool idea. And I hope we see that on more and more of the deadbolt lock style knives, because that's kind of an advantage there. Then finally, on the good side, this has some very nice details to it. In addition to having carbon fiber and everything like that, because this has big old chunks of carbon fiber, you've also got a bunch of sculpting here. You've got, you know, round contouring here into the jimping. You've got all kinds of jimping here. You've got these nice clips here, or you got the nice clip here. The lanyard hole is maybe a little bit huge, because you could put a whole freaking boat rope through there, but boat rope, that's probably not a term, but whatever it is, it's a thing. But it does mirror the hole in the blade here, which, by the way, you can use to flick with a little bit of wrist. But you've got that too. You've got the little gold pivot collar. I mean, this is a knife where they've clearly, and even in the back here, they've put a lot of effort into the ergonomics of it. It's clear. Helps if I don't slip off the flipper tab there. But nevertheless, yeah, I think overall there are some nice details here. It's clear that somebody spent a fair amount of time thinking about this design. And so to me, all of that is the good, is that it's got some nice details, the dial of the dent system, good action, good ergos. I do like the deadbolt lock a fair amount. It does carry reasonably, which is absolutely shocking, with a good clip. And they handled the recall thing, although I'd rather that not have happened. They handled it with integrity, and that's a beautiful thing. So to me, on the great side, this is a bold knife. Look, clearly somebody at a boardroom in CRKT decided, hey, we're going to go high-end. And they've been gesturing at that already. They've done things like the CRKT crossbones in the high-end version. They've been doing other things, like this little guy, the home front, etc. I mean, they've been playing on the high-end lately, but it seems to me like they decided they wanted a halo product. And it would have been very easy to take a hit knife and go nuts. You know, a solid gold M16. The Graham Razel, high-end Graham Razel, damn it, CRKT, but an SM100 in Mokutai, or a solid chunk of Damasteel Pilar. I mean, there are ways that they could have gone high-end and with a safer design. But instead, somebody said, you know what, let's make a $750 4.25-inch folder that weighs more than half a pound and has a bunch of new technologies. In fact, on their website, they are aware of what they've done here. It says for the header for this knife, overkill? Yep. And you know what? Yes, it is. Whatever this is, no matter what, this is a very, very bold move. It's different. It's not a remake of another knife that's in their lineup. They went and got a brand new design for it. It's not like anything else. Frankly, it's not like anything else really anybody else is making. I mean, the closest analogy I can think about this would be like the Cold Steel 4MAX, which has a similar feeling of just like a brick that happens to cut things, but oh my God. This is something that is absolutely 100% respectable in the boldness of it. No matter how you feel about this, you have to respect the stones involved in bringing this to the market and shocking the world, so to speak. So to me, at least, that's what's great here, is this was a bold freaking move. And so there you go. On the bad side, to start with, the steel on this guy is, if we zoom in a little bit here, we can see it is CTS HXP. That's right, they transposed the numbers there. Now look, XHP is a fine steel. I would have preferred 3M90 at 20 VC, maybe Metamax. I mean, but look, I mean, in all seriousness, that little error is not really important, particularly, it's kind of amusing to me, really. But XHP is not one of the, like, oh my God, super high-end steels that, yeah, I might have expected at $750. It's a fine steel, it's good to go. I can't complain too much about it, but yeah, there you go. It's definitely there. Next thing, T6, really, guys? I mean, seriously, look at the size of this freaking knife and then tell me, why are you using T6 for all of these little screws here, people? This is the one knife where you could have afforded to go T15 all around and you're still using T6, really? Really? I mean, it's not like you have to make the knife bigger to accommodate. Anyways, I digress. Next thing, this guy shipped to me missing a screw. Yeah, that's not great. It's very clear to me that the factory did not do a great job on that. And unfortunately, given that it is a $200 limited run edition, I'm kind of shocked that they weren't quality controlling those enough to catch that. That's a bit of an issue there. They sent me one, no problem, but still, that's a thing. Next thing, the centering on this guy is not perfect. That said, that might be on me, because I am not necessarily amazing at adjusting these deadbolt locks yet, and you can see it's pretty damn close. So, nevertheless, that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, it's probably on me. We'll just put it that way. Next thing, the carbon fiber. Actually, that brings me to the next point, though, that this is a very complicated takedown. Because you have not only, oh God, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 screws that you have to deal with on that side, and you also have to deal with the internal pivot, which happens to itself be a screw. This is a little bit complicated. It was fine. I made it through without any tutorials or anything like that, but it's also something to keep in mind. And it definitely made it trickier to get everything put back into place relative to knives that have 1 or 2 screws, like, well, something like this. You know, it's definitely more of an odyssey to do that. Keep that in mind. Next thing, the carbon fiber on this guy. Well, actually, the inlays generally are not necessarily flush with the carbon fiber in all these places. I can run my finger over this and very clearly feel the edges of the titanium relative to the carbon fiber. And this is the case on both sides. This is absolutely a nitpick, but on a $750 knife, I'm allowed to nitpick those kinds of things. Next thing, this is a limited edition. This is something I don't generally love. I'm going to be honest, it kind of makes sense here. This is meant to be a Halo product, and at the time of filming, they are still not sold out after couple of months, easy. So I don't think that's going to be a big issue here. I'm not going to beat them up on it too much, but the thing is, I hope that's not a game that they start playing, and they are indeed playing it with things like the home front here, right? Stop. Just make as many of them as people want. Life will be good, okay? Next thing, this guy has a non-committal recurve. You can see here that there is a little tiny bit of, where the heck is my ruler? There we go. A little tiny bit of recurving going on here. Is it enough to matter? No, but it certainly is enough to make sharpening difficult. So why are you doing that, guys? You had a nice sharpening choil going. Just roll it out there. Go for it. Next thing, this is using very thick stock. Now, look, at a knife this size, that makes sense, but unfortunately, it also has a very thick edge. That was one of the details and differences that, you know, I really did appreciate with, like, the Cold Steel 4 Max. It came down to a relatively thin edge here. This guy feels a little bit thicker than I'd like to see. Look, at some level, this is a knife that's meant to be, like, hacking and jackassing and, you know, attacking trees and things like that, so I can kind of see that decision. But one of the ways that you can show your excellence at $750 is by a really exceptional grind, and this is a fine grind. Maybe a little bit hollow, or maybe it's flat. I don't know. It's hard to say exactly. Looks pretty flat. But either way, I would have loved to see them come down just to a little bit thinner. That would have been a nice way to flex a little bit on this guy. Next thing, this guy has sharp edges everywhere. Like this edge here is sharp. The sides of the jimping, they've been rounded a little tiny bit, a little bit of breakage, but honestly, a lot of these edges are a little sharper than I'd like. Here, you can see they've done some chamfering, and maybe this is just my, you know, my personal ergonomics, but I'd like to see that, you know, dealt with differently. Next thing, this guy is so big as to be ridiculous. Now, I know what you're thinking. You know, Nick, you've got a bias towards small knives. The thing is, no. This ain't bias. This might be an opinion. Call this an opinion, but this knife is also huge. A 4.25-inch blade is illegal in a bunch of places. It is 0.18 inches thick. It is 11 ounces. There may be a human for whom this is properly sized. Like the guy who Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson runs away from in his nightmares. That guy could carry this knife. And frankly, carryability-wise, they did okay. But I can't think of many humans to whom this would be a very, very appropriately sized knife. This is gigantic. And so you would have to be equivalently gigantic, I think, to really get the full use out of this as an everyday carry knife. Then finally, on the bad side, this brings us to the price point. This is $750. I'm going to be honest with you. Looking at the overall construction, this feels closer to $450 or $500. Look, this is a lot of money. I mean, $750, no matter what you think about the way the knife was built, that takes it off the table for many people. And, you know, honestly, there's not much that's, like, super wrong here. But it is a well-made production knife, generally speaking, but this is more than a lot of really high-end production, knives. This is like a Holt Spectre is $750 or so as well, or like the Koenig Arius. I mean, this is two Spyderco Drunkens or a Spyderco Paisan and, you know, something else. And I mean, there were a bunch of everything that Chris Reeve Knives makes, or one of these guys. Those are a lot of really strong competitions. This is a perfection price where they're not allowed to have little issues like, you know, flush titanium or a missing screw, or you know, those things cannot be the case. But this is at $750, and they still are. And so, to me at least, I'm going to call the price bad. I'd like to see them have done better at this kind of price point, or charged a price point that made a little bit more sense here. So, to me at least, those are the bad things, and we'll come back on the ugly in a second there, but it's $750, which is a lot of freaking money. It is so big as to be just downright ridiculous for a lot of people. The takedown on this guy is very complicated. It's got sharp edges, thick stock, a non-committal recurve. It is a limited edition. The centering isn't perfect, although that, again, that could be on me in reassembly. I'm not as good at these yet. It is a T6 screw everywhere, why people, and it's in CTX HXB, which is kind of funny more than anything else. On the ugly front, this is sort of an extension of the price rant, but there are things here that feel like they're lacking for $750. I mean, I've had on my channel no shortage of knives that are $750 or above. You get things like your Holt Spectres, your Grimsmo Norsemans, all those kinds of things. Those can really make a difference. Where those extra dollars can make a difference there. And unfortunately, and they've got very nice things, like, you know, beautiful, intricate machining. They've got, you know, beautiful blade finishes, things like that. But this doesn't have any of those feelings of, you know, $750, like the blade on this guy. It's got a little bit of polish to it. You can see that on there. But the thing is, it's also a little over-polished. Some of these lines are very dull in here as a result. I feel like this was done by somebody who's used to doing, you know, CRKTs, rather than somebody used to doing $750 knives. Similar the engraving on this guy isn't particularly crisp. I mean, if we take a look here, I believe this is number 030 out of 200, but it's actually kind of hard to tell. And similarly on the back side here, I mean, maybe they're just covering their typo, but this is a nitpick through and through, but at $750, you are in nitpicking range. The fact that this isn't flush, the fact that there's no real hand finishing or polishing on any of these parts. These are just a relatively boring machine finish on this. There are some unchamfered edges in here. I mean, the machining on it is fine, and titanium and whatnot, but it's not the kind of intricacy or ornateness that you can find elsewhere, and this is actually half the price of this knife. So, I mean, you're not getting the kinds of high-end, ambitious machining or intricacy or precision that you get in a lot of other kinds of pieces. It's a knife that is very, very ambitious in its price, but not as ambitious in its execution. Honestly, more than anything, this feels like a knife that's made by a factory that generally makes, $200 knives, but it was made just very expensive. It was made at the highest specs. It feels like a knife that could very easily cost a lot of money. I'm not saying this isn't a good knife. I'm not saying it isn't a knife that's, well made, but it doesn't feel like an expensive knife. It's more like a regular knife that costs a little money, and it's kind of like they're out of their element in some ways. It shows. I mean, I would have liked to have seen them team up with a factory, or frankly, maybe somebody just there who is able to go the extra mile in hand finishing and polishing and things like that. Mirror edge the blade, the little kinds of details that can make a knife feel like, oh yeah, that's $750 any freaking day of the week. I would have liked to have seen the extra mile here, but instead this just feels like a very, very expensive, good old-fashioned production knife, and that's not something I'm super amazed with. And this is firmly a factory-made production knife, and so for me, for this price point, that's a little bit ugly. I'd like to see them have gone just the extra mile in terms of those finishing levels to make this feel like a $750 knife, rather than a very nice, very expensive production piece. Final conclusions. This knife is completely and totally nuts. I don't really feel like anybody needed me to tell them that, but I'm going to go ahead and say it anyways. It came from left field, and it shocked, with a capital X, a lot of people. And I think that's kind of what it was meant to do. Maybe I'm misreading this, but actually, I feel like this knife is a halo product for CRKT. It is designed to be expensive, designed to be over the top, designed to be borderline mythical. The idea here is the same. It's the same reason they're making this knife as, Tesla offering a $123,000 car, or Apple offering a Mac Pro for 30 grand, $156,000 Omega watches tourbillon. Not because they expect a lot of people to buy them, but the fact that this is out there actually sends a message. And the fact that this was sent to a bunch of reviewers actually cements that idea for me. I think the idea that's going on here is called price anchoring. It's a marketing, basically, idea that says if you show somebody something very, very expensive, then things you show them afterwards actually feel much less expensive. When they release something like this at $750, the rest of their lineup seems less expensive. If you want to charge, a couple of $100 for something like this, it feels much more reasonable relative to having something like this on the table. I think it's a cool idea at some level. I mean, certainly it's been psychologically attested to work many a time, but I think that's more what's going on here than they're marketing this as a, somebody's solution for everyday carry. But I can see their reasoning behind it. But all of that is sort of independent of the knife. What about the knife itself? Well, look, there's a lot of good here. It's got a very unique design, a good lock, solid ergos, good action, some nice technical touches, good overall fit and finish. I mean, honestly, if the factory that made this can make $300 knives in the future, I think that's a beautiful thing. This is clearly a very good factory. It may not be a factory that's cut out for $700 knives, but it's certainly one that's cut out for very high-end pieces from them, and I think that's great. Whoever they're working with here needs to be a part of their regular stable. But it is also not without some trouble. It has little details that need to be addressed at this price point. It's got a weird little recurve, a thick stock, and a thick edge, moreover. It's got some sharp edges that don't need to be there, a huge price tag, an even more huge size, and a level of finishing that is very, very good for the CRKT, but it's not in line with $750 knives from everybody else. So I feel like this knife really, if you're thinking about this, well, you need to be a specific buyer. If you just want a good knife, I'm not going to send you here for $750. $750. Frankly, if you just want a good knife, you can get 3 good knives for $750. Anyways, this is a knife that I think is targeted at like a CRKT enthusiast. Somebody who's been collecting the brand for years and years and years might want this as sort of a capstone of their collection. Or maybe if you're just a collector of knives in general, this is absolutely 100% going to be a collectible sort of thing for people who really are into that. Or maybe there is somebody out there for whom this is just perfection, where they're looking at this and they're like, you know what, Nick, I don't care about any of those things you said. I want a really large, ridiculous knife with a cool lock, a good action, and a blade that I could very easily beat through several car doors on my way to a tree. That would be... Then, you know what? Here you go. This may be perfect. You have to be aware that it is redonkulously large. You have to probably be a redonkulously large human or a really tiny one. That would be kind of entertaining as well. But either way, if that's your feeling, maybe, yeah, sure, consider it. But I think for the majority of people, this isn't the best choice. But ultimately, I don't know that CRKT needs you to buy this knife. If I'm reading this right, I think the purpose of this knife is actually accomplished by its mere existence. It was meant to shock the knife world, so to speak. It was meant to just say, you know what, we can do something high-end and crazy. And they did something crazy, and they did something that for them is very, very high-end. And I think they did accomplish that. This will always, I think for a long time, guide people's perceptions of CRKT. But at the same time, even with that on the table, I'm not necessarily sure that for the majority of people, this is the best way to spend your hard-earned cash, which I'm assuming they would spell CAX. I don't know. But anyways, there you go. I hope this has been interesting to you, that I didn't shock you too badly, and that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.